By all accounts, Ray Lee Chabot is one of Southeast Michigan's most well-respected judges, admired even by lawyers who come out on the losing end in her courtroom. But what's at issue here now is how much time she spends on the bench and whether or not it's affecting how she does her job. A circuit court judge for the last 10 years, Ray Lee Chabot has earned her reputation as one of Oakland County's toughest, known to dress down defendants, even attorneys in her courtroom.
You used the word polygraph. We spent all kinds of time telling you the word can't be used.
But it's Judge Chabot who's on the defensive tonight in the wake of an Action News investigation into her courthouse work habits and whether she's earning her almost $140,000 a year salary. Courtroom insiders tipped us off, telling us that for years Judge Chabot's attendance at circuit court has been poor. So with undercover cameras rolling, we started watching. It's just after 9 o'clock on a Thursday last March. Court started a half hour ago, but in Judge Chabot's chambers, things are running slow because the judge hasn't left home yet. In fact, she won't pull into work until a full hour after court is set to begin. And when she finally shows up around 9:30, Chabot spends a few hours on the bench, but shortly after 12:30, it's time to leave the building. The destination is West Bloomfield's Red Coat Tavern. And if you think the wheels of justice grind slowly, it turns out the wheels of lunch grind just as slow. Hours go by and still no sign of her honor, until finally, just before 4 o'clock, she emerges, spending just as much time at lunch, a full 3 hours, as she did all day in court. After she paid her tab and headed out, it was time for a hug and to head home. Monday, March 28th, late again for work. This time it's a 9:20 start for Judge Chabot, but as noon approaches, it's off to lunch again, this time at Buffalo Wild Wings. She finishes up at 1:15, but it's not back to work for the judge. Instead, she heads home again, less than 3 hours on the bench. Criminal defense attorney Dan Haji, seen here with Kwame Kilpatrick, has spent time all over Michigan courtrooms. He said he can't imagine a good reason why any judge would spend so little time in the courthouse.
I just can't see how a judge can just go there in the morning for a couple hours and have nothing to do thereafter.
Haji has argued before Chabot, and like many lawyers we talked to, says he always found her to be fair. But Haji says a judge's work is never done.
There are briefs to read. There are legal research to do. There are many obligations and duties imposed upon them that they need to fulfill.
On some days, we found Chabot didn't go anywhere near the courtroom, like Friday, April 1st. In a recent email to Action News, Chabot says, "I believe I was at work in the morning, but that's not what our cameras saw. Chabot didn't leave home until just before 11 o'clock, and when she finally did, it was off to an office building on Orchard Lake. After an hour inside, there was other business to be done, at the Gap. A full 40 minutes passed before the judge emerged from the clothing store, bag in hand, and after running a quick errand, it was home. She didn't set foot inside her courtroom on this day or on April 7th either, though she says she spoke at a medical malpractice seminar in the morning. On that day, we saw her grabbing an early lunch at Andiamo Restaurant in Bloomfield Hills. That's her at a table for 3. But putting in time on the bench was not on the menu. After lunch, the judge went straight home. Over the 5 weeks we watched Judge Chabot, we saw what a half-dozen court insiders told us has been commonplace for years. Showing up late, working only half days or less, sometimes not showing up at all, and not putting in for time off. And despite having 18 criminal and civil judges, a recent study says the Oakland Circuit Court needs 3 more to keep up with its busy docket. But when it comes to completing trials, Chabot ranks at the bottom. In 2009, her colleagues averaged 25 civil and criminal trials a year, with Judge Jack McDonald completing the most at 47. In the same year, Judge Chabot held only 6. In 2010, while her colleagues averaged more than 24, she held only 11. Chabot declined an interview with Action News, but issued this statement, saying that looking at the number of trials she completes is an inaccurate reflection of a judge's productivity. She says, and records show, that she's in the middle of the pack when it comes to resolving total cases, and that she uses methods less costly than trials to resolve disputes, which saves taxpayers money. And lawyers we talked to said she's well prepared for hearings and has a reputation for fairness.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
But we still had more questions for the judge, and so we caught up with her outside a local restaurant last week.
You want to know why I haven't returned your calls?
Well, we'd like to know why you don't show up for work.
Well, you know, you're approaching me here on my lunch hour. I'm not addressing this. We've returned the reports over to you, and I comply with the same rules that every other judge has to comply with.
Chabot points to state policy that says judges don't need to report working only half days, and she says she doesn't need to be near a courtroom to be productive.
Shouldn't you work a full day for the taxpayers?
What is whip?
You're paid a very high salary. You only work many half days. Sometimes you don't come into work.
Look, do your story.
Chabot's boss, Chief Judge Nancy Grant, told Action News that her judges are inside the courthouse working very hard. She would not tell us if Chabot had told her she was leaving work on the days we just showed you. But even if she had, she wouldn't have necessarily had to use time off. Judges only need to report full-day absences to their bosses, meaning they can come in, spend a few hours on the bench, and call it a day without having to use vacation time. I'm Ross Jones, Channel 7 Action News.
All right.